Hey, what's going on, Aspiration Athletes? It's Devin here, and today we're going to be talking a bit about overcoming your fear of judgment and some strategies and insights on how to enhance your life as a result. So, I feel like this is a really important topic, you guys. We live in such a world where judgment is all around us, and it's in our nature. So, it's already within our nature to be judgmental and to have passing judgment upon others, especially depending on what peer group you're within. But judgment is going to be an inherent part of life, and knowing how to overcome and strategies in being able to uh, enhance your life as a result of conquering some of maybe these insecurities you may have, or facing some of the fears that you may have, are going to really allow you to progress a bit further in life as a result of challenging yourself and changing in the process. So I always go back to, and when I think about my own experience with fear and being judged uh, by my peers in a social setting, I think about the divorce that um, I had to endure between my parents when I was young, and how um, that really, to the peer group that I was in, they were. I was kind of like an outcast, and I was being judged because I was one of the only kids coming from that kind of household. And to be separated from my classmates as a result of that, they took me into some anger management type of clash, which separated me from my classmates, the normal class setting. So I was already excluded. There was no inclusion with this process. So having to endure that at such a young age, I took that with me moving forward throughout my life. And what I can tell you about judgment is it's absolutely crippling. If you cannot find ways to uh, move past this fear of insecurities or judgments that you're having, you're never going to take the necessary risk within your life to change yourself. So this was kind of the story unfolding throughout my life, and I remember, um, even going through parts of my youth and being involved in sport, where I was so fearful of being judged because my lack of being the star player, or my build at the time. I was a heavier set kid, and I was bullied a lot because of it. So I really understood those social pressures and anxieties of not performing up to societal standards. And when you're fostered in this type of environment, it really allows you to question and starts, getting you to question your self worth. And once it gets to that point, it's gotten too far. And I know that we're all, and a good portion of us are living in that current state of mind right now, and it's a limiting factor in your life, ladies and gentlemen. And as of recent, within the last year and a half, 2 years of my life, I've made some massive change in my life just as a result of overcoming these fears and fear of judgment. But it wasn't always this way, and that's what I want to paint the picture for you moving forward. Is you may be in a situation where you have social pressures, financial pressures. Maybe you're not driving the newest and latest car, or have the best sneakers, or these are all things that society molds us into thinking and predicating our success upon, when that's really not the case. And as a result, if we fall short of that societal standard that has been set, we are, um, you know, taking the blame on ourselves, and that negative impact moving forward really isolates you, and you don't have that will or passion to want to take risk, because you're fearing failure. And what I have to say is failure only occurs when you stop trying. So as long as you're progressively working at whatever it is that you're passionate about, you are not failing. There's going to be some bumps along the way, and you're going to face judgment. You're going to face social pressures. You're going to face opposition from your parents, from those closest to you. And it's a necessary part of that growth because you are becoming your own individual. And I am just I'm so thankful to have endured and kind of put some of these pressures on myself even throughout my life. So putting myself in a position to be challenged, in a position to be uncomfortable, was a necessary part of my growth and my upbringing, and I'm very, very thankful and have so much gratitude toward the fact that my father and mother were so supportive in enabling that process for me. And I know many of you don't have that. I know many of you don't have that support, but I am here. I am here to tell you that it is so vital for you to challenge yourself. I am your support. This community is your support. You need to go outside of your typical practice, your typical norm. You need to challenge your abilities and overcome that fear of opinion, right? And that fear of opposition. We are so fearful of being wrong without even knowing what the right answer is. So, going back to the point, growing up and developing, I put myself in these positions I recognized I was self aware. That was the first step, becoming self aware enough to be inside my own head. I was very much an isolated kid. And I think that being a result of bullying, it can put you in this like isolation mode where you really become interconnected with a sense of self, because you're not an extrinsic or an extrovert at that point. I was very much alone, so I was in my own head. I had in-depth thoughts, and I thought about what type of change I could make in my life rather than dwelling on the situation at hand. That was the moment things changed for me. And it's so clear to me now, even at nearly 22 years old. It's the same at 32 years old. It's the same at 33 years old. Whatever your case is, coming to that realization is the first step. Being self-aware enough is the first step toward overcoming that judgment factor. Once I knew that my course of action lied in things that I could control, not outside my means of control, like other people's opinions, I was able to transform my life. So moving forward, I started putting myself in more positions to change. I started playing more sports. I started becoming more of an athlete. I started spawning more opportunity in my path. And I failed along the way. I failed greatly. I fell in love with wrestling, and I was very good at it coming up in high school. And I tell this story a lot. I was ranked in Michigan, and I was, intended to be a state qualifying athlete within the 189 pound weight class. And there was a lot of expectation weighing on my shoulder, a lot of judgment, right? Judgment upon my character, judgment upon my execution, judgment upon my consistency, judgment upon my dedication. Things that made me question my sense of self-worth if I didn't complete the task at hand, which was perform optimally to get to state level. When I didn't do that, when I fell short, I had an existential crisis. I had an identity crisis. And that was the pitfall in my life too, where again, it was that challenge that I had to put myself in. It was that risk of potentially falling short that was part of the process. Because out of this came so much more than wrestling in college or wrestling in the state finals could have ever brought me. It brought me opportunity to grow. So what I'm telling you is that even that fear of judgment that your mom or dad, are not agreeing with your opinions on your outlook, or maybe your peers don't agree with your political views, or maybe you're you're you just have a different point of view from somebody else's. You have to trust your truth. And this is where it becomes an important piece to become an individual. It's so vital to be able to form your own opinions, and that becomes an aspect of self-awareness. So that point of isolation, for me, was a moment of growth, and where I knew how to have these conversations with myself. A lot of us are so afraid to face ourselves. We let others dictate our character. We let others dictate our outlook, or our point of view on life. Um, Look at media, right? Like these are all things that, when you get inside your own head and you start bringing yourself back to things that you can control, your whole life changes. So I would move forward, and wrestling was out of my life. That was no longer a part of it. What can I do to work within my strengths so that I can create a life for myself that's worth living? And these are things I had to ask myself at 18 years old. So that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody. And then you're being faced with the financial pressures of college. So now I'm facing these financial pressures of, how do I afford college? How do I find a spot? How do I create value for myself to separate myself from the plot of individuals who are going after the same position that I was seeking out? So, now you're comparing yourselves to others, and it all just leads back to that same point: judgment. You have to have tunnel vision. You have to be able to block everything else out, you guys. When you start focusing on what everyone else is thinking or doing, you're not focusing on what you could be thinking or doing to put you ahead of them. It's all about these facts that you can, and these factors that you can control. We can't control what X, Y, and Z is doing. We can't control, nature, the environment. But there are situations and preparations that we can put in place, and lifestyle change and habit change and thought process change and self-awareness techniques and developing a higher sense of purpose that will allow us to overcome the micro judgment within that moment, or within that small, group of people. I'll give you another example, and this will be my last one, and most recent. I'm 21 years old, coming up in a society where success is predicated upon degree acquisition, higher education. So I'm already outside that societal norm going in the fitness industry. And although things are developing in this industry and I'm happy where I'm at, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of expectation that comes with this process of finding a good enough job to make enough money. How many times have you heard that? So now I'm was faced with this, crisis of having to not only figure out my studies, but I'm such a hyper aware person of where I want to be within X amount of years, and I always try to think of a 5-year plan. I looked at the demographics, I looked at the job descriptions, I looked at where the industry was at, and it wasn't anything that we were told. I'm in Michigan right now, folks. So there was a lot of things within our program, the sports performance program, that I was going through in my undergraduate degree process, that there was just some fallacies along the way that I found that if I didn't create enough value for myself and create this time-bound goal, that I was going to fall short. Well, and that became dangerous. That thought process became dangerous, because then I was comparing myself to everyone else who was in this program, trying to get the same thing that I was, a spot, a chance, an opportunity. And it got to a certain point where I was so determined and so willing to go the extra mile. I got my certification without any affirmations or directional guidance from my counselors or anything like that. I went and sought out my certification. I went and sought out a job in personal training, and I started a movement with my bodybuilding venture and in a journey in my process, going through all of these different extreme training modalities and being successful in each venture, that I started realizing that what we were learning in the classroom wasn't exactly what was being applied in real life. And there was just a different approach to fitness that I had formed in my experience of being out and doing things differently than the status quo. Again, putting myself in a position to change as a result of challenging myself. So I challenged myself by putting my certification in checking and getting that done. I challenged myself by, taking all of my credit loads on top of doing a bodybuilding prep, on top of meal prepping, all of it, everything that went involved in this lifestyle change. I had to put myself in a state where judgment was not a part of it. I did become an outcast soon after, when I did not believe in the education system in front of me that I was a part of. I developed and formed my own thoughts and opinions on fitness, and I don't think it is a um, one black and white topic where it's so abstract. I think that there's a lot of variables to consider, and there's no way that you can find all of these things in a classroom. So I decided to take a step back from Eastern, and I did so proudly, and I did so with my head held high, and I was in my senior year. So if you can, a lot of people were obviously not in my corner in this battle, and I fought this one alone. And you may be fighting these battles alone, folks. You may be the only one on your own team. That doesn't make you wrong, especially if you have a gut feeling. So you have to overcome your fear of judgment, your fear of failure, and trust the process. Trust your willingness to put in the work necessary to see it through. So that's what I did. I left Eastern Michigan University and I started Aspiration Athletics. And I'm very proud of where it's at. And I couldn't be happier doing what I love to do. And no, it isn't at a point where it can support my financial living. It's an accessory point right now for me, but it's an entry point to the life that I want to envelop myself in. And I want to show all of you and document the progress going through, because most people did not believe that I would make it this far. And I've gotten the position and the job that these undergraduates who are trying to finish their degree are struggling to acquire. And I've been very blessed, and I have so much gratitude for the process along the way. However, it took me putting myself out of a situation where I knew that wasn't my strength, right? And doubling down on what was my strength. I have intrinsic motivation. I could do all of the things necessary and hold myself accountable. I knew that. So it was a matter of mapping out the schematic of how to get from point A to point B. For one, putting myself in check and understanding that there's a certain way that I learn, and it wasn't in the classroom environment. So I took myself out of that. I tried to create opportunity by sending out resumes to all of the fitness studios in the area. Some and most declined because I didn't have a bachelor's degree, but I found one that accepted me. And I am very proud to say that I do fantastic work and have the utmost dedication in my practice, and my clients feel that. And, you know, being able to share that in many facets, whether it's currently right now what I aspire to make my main source and main life goal is building this aspiration athletics idea, this community. But I also serve individuals in another setting, and that may be where you're at. That may be where you aspire to be, but it's going to take overcoming some judgment factors along the way. Not everyone's going to agree with your process, but if you have a goal in mind, if you aspire for something and it speaks to you, it calls to you, there should be no reason why you don't entertain the idea of things that you can do and actions that you can take to acquire it. Even if it means going outside the status quo or outside the standard that's been set by society. So that's all I have for you folks today. I really wanted to get down and interpersonal with this one. I always try to shed a little bit of insight on my experience and in real experience, no bullshit, because life is real. And in a world where everything is dramatic, in a world where everything is so alternate, factually related, I try to be as real as I can, because ultimately that is what creates real change, is the honesty, the integrity behind it, the passion behind it. And I bring that to the table with my experiences, and I know that you can take the insight that I provide and make massive change in your life. So that's all I have for you today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned something along the way that can help you aspire for more out of your life. So have a happy Memorial Day. Have a safe Memorial Day. And thank you guys for tuning in. Please subscribe. And never forget, aspire to inspire.